Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending another IIBA Tools and Techniques Thursday. Despite the pandemonium ravaging our countries, your presence is much appreciated. My name is Timothy. Our microclass for today is brought to you by the IIBA Durban chapter, and we'll be considering a topic titled Approaching a Product Requirement Document. I will quickly go through some quick rules and other announcements, after which I will introduce you to our distinguished speaker for tonight. Please stay on mute unless cleared to talk. Switch off your video. Only the presenter's video is allowed. The microclass will be 45 minutes long, 30 minutes for presentation, and 15 minutes for questions and answers. You may post your questions in the main chat. We will read them to the presenter when it is time for questions and answers. Presentations will be uploaded on the IIBA SA YouTube page, found at www.youtube.com/user/IIBSA. We'll be sharing the link with you during the presentation. Unfortunately, we do not send out the presentations deck. To become a member of the IIBA South Africa, go to iibasa.wildapricot.org/join us. For our next event, visit the IIBA South Africa event page at iibasa.wildapricot.org/events. If you would also like to present a tool or technique to the community, please contact us at durban@southafrica.iiba.org. About our presenter for tonight, Banu Raghuraman is an IT professional with experience primarily in the fintech domain. She comes from an engineering background, enjoys problem solving and sharing her experience through public speaking. She's also engaged in mentoring programs to encourage many newcomers into the tech space. Banu is also a published author on the topic of empathy. In her spare time, she likes to learn about new cultures and arts and crafts. In today's session, you will learn what the differences are in the business analysis and project management world, and therefore, what approaches would work well to develop a product requirement document. Banu, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Tim. That was a very generous introduction. Thank you so much for that. And it's my pleasure to be meeting the rest of the folks here. I will start sharing my screen and we can take it from there. All right, I hope everyone can see my screen here, but it's a title slide right now. And essentially, as Tim said, I wanted to share some of my experiences in terms of how I handle the product requirements document. And these are more of personal life learnings, but there are also other techniques out there that will work best for different industries and different domains. So I'm always open to learning as well. So I'm hoping to learn a lot more from you as well during the Q&A session. I had actually prepared a slide for myself in terms of introduction, but Tim gave a better one. But the main thing that I wanted to take away from this is I really enjoy problem solving. So product management is great for folks who are really into, uncovering things further and further and trying to understand why things are a certain way. It's almost having the childlike curiosity of trying to figure out why, certain things are the way they are, how you can improve them, and this constant want to improve efficiency and be better than what you were yesterday. And the second thing that I wanted to flag was just this ample amount of learning that I'm getting through mentorship and public speaking, because learning has become a bi-directional type of activity. It's not very pedagogical in the sense that one person keeps talking and the other person keeps receiving, but there's cross-generational activity happening, cross-cultural activities happening, international boundaries are being crossed in terms of how we are learning and developing ourselves, new ways and techniques to learn things. So as members of the business analysis community, and as an ex-BA myself, I've recently moved into the product and program management space. It's been about 4 or 5 years, but prior to that, I had been in the BA space for a long time, and I enjoyed myself thoroughly. And that was one of the indicators for me to say that, hey, you know, maybe I can expand my knowledge onto some other domains with all the new things that were coming up. And that's why I picked the product and program management area. So hopefully that gives you a bit of insight into why product management and what some of my experiences have been. Let's dive into the main content here. So what I've done on this slide is to split it based on, you know, what are some of the differences which are highlighted on the top, and what are some of the similarities which I've tried to capture at the bottom here. So with the BA and PM type of environment, BAs have always been looked at more of a tactical aspect of things. So once you have identified certain things to happen, for example, a project is very much targeted towards an initiative. It has a definite start and end time. It definitely has some implementation goals and goals that you're trying to achieve at the end of the cycle. That's where a BA kind of comes in. Whereas for a product manager, it's very much a scope of the product itself, meaning everything and anything associated with that product, anything that you need to do with regards to that, whether that be ongoing maintenance, whether that be specific projects and so on and so forth, a PM is involved. So there's a larger scope. We have basically expanded the scope. The BA tends to focus a lot more on requirements, a lot more on stakeholder management. They're managing the plan for the product itself, but not necessarily the other pieces. Again, that has also varied in my experience. There were some roles whereby I was sort of a business consultant, where I started poking my nose into, you know, the monetary side of things as well. I was managing some of the resourcing pieces. I was making sure that the solution architect was kind of liaising with the tech team and so on. So my scope of duties expanded or extended more than just being a BA. So a BA's role in that way has been quite fluid in some of the companies that I've worked with. But essentially, my ownership was towards the plan of the product. What are the requirements? How do we plan on pushing those out, managing the roadmaps? However, when you look at the PM side of things, they're sort of the hub of the multiple spokes that the product touches. So they're not just thinking about the requirements, but they're thinking about everything downstream. So they liaise with the development team, the testing team, the implementation team, the evolution as well. So what is the ongoing improvements that we're going to be putting into the product? And that was just the building side of things, but they're also involved on the other side, whereby we've got the marketing operations, we've got the lead generation, we've got you know, physical marketing, direct marketing, online marketing, depending on the product that you are putting out. Even going for product presentations. So if they're part of conferences, they tend to be the face of the product, and they're the person who's kind of, you know, pushing the product forward and promoting why it's important and key to pick it up. So there's a lot more visibility. There's a lot more ownership when it comes to product management compared to the BA side. BAs generally tend to be at the project level or the scope that they're trying to manage. Anything more, they tend to liaise with other BAs to try and find out what is it that impacts their piece and what are the themes that are going to come back to their project. So it's really, it's got a defined line in terms of ownership of what they need to do within that specific project. Whereby on the product side, you will notice that one product manager might be managing different projects at one go. And that's because there are different features that are being built, different aspects that are being built, different teams that are being interacted with. And therefore, their capability would be to expand further than just what that one product might entail. It might be everything that's linked to that. BAs, because they're part of a larger team and they're only managing one component of the initiative, they might have partial ownership of the success of the project itself. We always say that, you know, someone who fails to plan plans to fail, and therefore extrapolating that to requirements, you want to make sure that you have really thought through requirements. We've all seen that graph of the cost to fix a mistake depending on which stage of the project it happens, and requirements as one of the lowest costs. So if we detect some of the things that will go wrong at the requirement phase, we will be able to fix it for a lower cost compared to much later in the game. However, all that being said, you're really just owning the success of the requirements piece as part of the product itself, as part of the project itself. But the PM, on the other hand, they pretty much own the success of the entire product. If that product doesn't do well in the market, it's up to them. If it does well, it's up to them. So a lot of the commission structures that I've seen for product manager pay also relies on a commission structure, which is tied into the success of their product. However, a commission structure on the BA world is relatively rare. There are some cases where that is true. I have seen that in a more sales-based type of roles, but not so much on the product management side. It's much more common to see a commission structure play into a product manager role. Now that we've seen some of the differences, let's look at some of the commonalities. Both roles, they require some sort of idea of the high level picture. If you don't really know what the landscape or the map looks like in terms of what you are working on, and that includes things outside of your context as well. Even if you're working on a specific product, you want to know where that product is in relation to a lot of other things in the market. So looking at complementary products, looking at replaceability, looking at the elasticity in terms of the economics of the product and how it's going to be sold. All these things constitute the high level picture. And on the BA side, you really want to know where your project is in line with the rest of the landscape that you're working on. Stakeholder management, this goes without saying. One of the reasons I have become so chatty and so, I call myself Chatty Cathy, but one of the reasons I've become so chatty is because you need to know how to make good relationships. You need to know how to communicate well. You need to know how to present yourself in the right manner so that it gives confidence to the audience that, whatever you're managing on their behalf or for them is actually going to come out in the right way. It's going to be panning out in the right kind of outcome that they're expecting. Tech knowledge levels vary, but to some extent, we do need to be tech savvy because most of the products that we're working with these days do have some element of technology in them. So even if you are a strategic BA, even if you are someone who has been working on functional requirements, you do need some kind of idea, at least the lingo that's being spoken, the terms that are being used, having a basic grasp on what that technology is very key. Now, when you go into more tech-specific organizations, something, some companies like Amazon or Facebook, where there's so much more focus on technology, obviously your role will change quite a bit as well. You can't just go in there as a functional BA. There might be some roles which require functional BAs, but most of their roles will require you to have a good understanding of technical knowledge, and the same thing flies with the product management side as well. Change management, that goes without saying when you're talking about stakeholder management. Rarely have I seen that a product manager has like a massive team to manage directly that, that reports directly to them. And the same thing with the BA space as well. We don't necessarily manage teams in a traditional HR kind of way, unless you're a BA manager and you're managing other BAs, and that goes without saying. Same thing with product managers as well. You might be managing a group of junior PMs, but they are all managing their own piece. And that kind of ties into the next point, which is about the influential leadership. It's all about knowing who you're working with and therefore influencing them through good decisions and good points that will help you, convince and get your point across. And last but not the least, multifaceted view, which kind of ties in with the high level picture, is that you are not necessarily working on one specific piece. You're not, you don't have these blinders on the side that, make you focus on one thing, but you really need to open up, and your peripheral vision is very key to having a successful project, because anything can happen at any point in time. You need good understanding to not to the point where you get to the nitty-gritty details, but really to understand, if something goes wrong, who do I need to tap? How do I need to solve this problem? And at least have a good grasp on problem solving skills so that you're able to diagnose what's going well, what's not going well, and then act accordingly. So that kind of gives you a differentiation and similarities between these two roles. And hopefully this is going to tie in a bit into this diagram as well. This is really to give you the scope of how terminologies are generally used. I wouldn't say that this is the be all and end all. Depending on various companies and how they have approached historically some of these concepts, they might differ, but more or less they map to certain levels in the organization. And I've seen them being used interchangeably depending on how mature the organization is. And in some cases, I've also seen them being used with different words. For example, portfolio could be line of business, or program could be initiatives. Products could also be called as services, and projects could be like one-time sprints and agile projects that people have different terminologies for. But really, each of these levels are really telling you how you can group and create a scope around what you're working on. Project generally tends to be allusions to a more tactical aspect. So if you have planned for things, if you know what the outcome is going to be, then generally it tends to be a project where you have implementation goals, and those goals will be measured against specific metrics that you need to work towards. All the other levels that you're looking at, portfolio, program, as well as product, they also have their own goals and they also have their own metrics, but they tend to boil down from an enterprise level vision. So if the enterprise says, oh, we need to make sure that all our customers have good financial goals based on their personal requirements and things like that, that is the overarching enterprise goal that you're working towards. And then you've got all these individual portfolio, program, and product level details that will map back to the enterprise goals and visions. And then you would have specific metrics that measure the success at each level. So just a bit of recap in terms of the different terminology that's being used out there, especially with the product centric or product oriented world that we're getting towards. Some of those traditional naming structures are changing to product friendly terminology. So just something for you to keep in the back of your mind. So getting into the requirements document itself, as I said, with both BA and PMs, the reason why it's so synonymous is because I feel like a lot of skills, and I personally as well, I started off as a BA and I've transitioned into a product role. I found myself to be quite capable to handle a lot of these aspects that come in the product management space, simply because the skills are very similar and transferable. In fact, back in the day, I don't know if it's still a running joke, but they say that, if you're in a company and no one knows what exactly to call you, you can be called a business analyst. Because at the end of the day, that's what we try to do. We basically facilitate a lot of the discussions. We fill the gaps. We make sure that people know what needs to be done, and we know exactly what needs to be connected to the end goal. So in that way, if you think about, us being jack of all trades, or Jill of all trades, you're really looking at what needs to be bridged in as the gap. So some of these concepts that I've listed here, they are basically helping you understand what is your target audience and what do you actually need to do in the requirements document. So stage of product development. If you're working in a startup whereby proof of concept has not been done yet, they're still assessing the market, your PRD is going to be looking very different from a company that has possibly done multiple iterations of the product. And now you're really looking to scale it up to a different level or bring a different level of innovation to the product itself. So your PRD will look very different from someone who's done doing the same thing in a startup environment. So understand where the product is in terms of its evolution. The next thing you want to look at is the level of technical details required. Like I said, some of the product roles are very technical, and usually that tends to be for a technical solution in the beginning of the product phase. It's more important to have technical people at that phase because you're really looking at the feasibility, the doability, what's the viability based on the solutions available in the market, how much money is that going to cost, do we have the technical expertise? So that tends to be more of the startup type of scenario. But as you're going further, if the company's vision is really to be a technical leader, or a technology leader, something like what Facebook is trying to do, or something like what Amazon is trying to do, whereby all their innovations have a massive underlying requirement for technical knowledge, your PRD will tend to reflect that company culture as well. So in that case, you will need to maybe include snippets of code in your document so people know that they're not, recreating the wheel and they have some sort of snippet there. Or it could be directly linking to a lot of code bases in GitHub and different types of tech repositories that are being used. So your PRD really becomes the table of contents, if you will, of various code bases that you need to link to. And then on top of that, you add a functional layer which explains why you are linking to specific things. So PRD can very well look like something like that. In other cases, it could be a heavy solution architecture based document as well. So really understanding the need with which you are trying to fulfill or what you're trying to fulfill with this PRD is very important in understanding. What level is it being applied to? So when you go back to this diagram, the same PRD can be used in multiple levels. A PRD can be applied at a portfolio level because that really defines, the portfolio is your product itself, and you're trying to describe everything around that portfolio. The level of detail that's there at a portfolio level PRD might not be the same at the project level PRD. It might be very different. So understanding what level you're working with, whether it's going to be more strategic, whether it's going to be more tactical, whether it's going to be a mix of two, if it's going to be functional, it's going to be non-functional, it's very important in understanding that. The industry that you're going for. So companies that have a huge base in the technology side are going to have a lot more information about the technology aspects. But if you're looking at more of a functional product or a service, which really requires tying in different types of service providers together, not really talking about the technology side because that is not a key component in what you're offering, your PRD will look very different for a technical person versus something that's focused on service-oriented details. Agile methodology. I often find that the maturity with which a specific organization is at reflects in their requirement taking as well. Back in the day, I used to use a lot of the system shall statements. Personally, I actually prefer starting the statement that way because it stops me from thinking too much about it. It's almost like Mark Zuckerberg wearing the same t-shirt every day, right? You don't have to think about what you're going to be wearing from your wardrobe that day. I don't have to think about creative ways of how the statement is going to start. So I just use the system shall. Even today, even with the agile methodology, I use the same thing. But of course, there's that structure about as a user, I want to do this so that I achieve something. So there are aspects where you can mix both of them. So I use a bit of the user stories, and then I use an almost like an appendix to explain further what that user story is trying to tell me. So it's really up to you in terms of how developed and how mature the organization is, but that is definitely a telltale sign of how the organizational culture will seep into some of your documents as well, and how people would want to view and read your documents. Decision making. This is really going back to what is the end goal of that document. So if you have considered all the other parts before this, it's really easy for you to figure out what is the decision that I'm trying to make at the end of this PRD. Who is the person who's going to be using it, and what are the key things that they're going to take away from this document? And that will really help you in terms of understanding whether there should be specific aspects in there. One of the main things that I've seen when we moved over to the Agile methodology is that people think Agile means haphazard, which means you don't have to document stuff. Things are going so fast that it's neck-breaking speed or whatnot, so you don't really need to document. And that's a myth. In my opinion, documents are always good, mainly because the person who has specified the requirements may not be the same person who is implementing them. And there might be a lot of decisions that are taking place in the middle as well. And that was another part that I wanted to allude to, is decision making usually happens in the strategic side of things, but the tactical work, the actual work, is being done by someone else. But if the tactical person does not really understand why something was done, then they're not going to be able to come up with the best solution possible for the pain that you're trying to resolve, or the requirement that you're trying to meet. So it's very important that as part of the document, and I think the Agile user stories kind of capture that essence when we say, I want to do this so that, but beyond that, there might be other decisions as well. I might want to do something so that I can do something, but why do I want to do it? And what are the different solutions that I explored before this and why they didn't work? All these aspects are part of the historical context that you want to provide someone who is creating a solution, so that you're not reinventing the wheel. Timeline of the development. Now, if you are looking, if you know that the specific solution that you're working with is really a proof of concept, then you don't want to dive into too much detail about things that are not going to be covered as part of your MVP or your minimum viable product. You really just want to focus on what the team is trying to achieve at the end of the day. And if that's going to be a quick delivery, then you want to minimize the time that you're spending in going into too much detail. Focus on things that are important. And then when you know that that work has been done, you can revisit a lot of these things after. Last but not the least, the size of the organization. I've worked in a startup environment. I've worked in a corporate structure. I've also worked in a mid-management or a mid-sized organization. I've also worked in a strategic side of things, and I've worked on the technical side of things. So in each of those cases, I've been fortunate enough to see blatant differences in how PRDs are being handled. So in a startup environment, I used to work with the team in the morning, get all the requirements. Afternoon, I used to spend documenting them, making sure that everything is linked, all the tickets are submitted so that our dev team is able to work on it. And then the next morning, I'll come back and then some new solution would have come up. And I would have to scratch and start again from scratch for the next day based on the new things that have come in. In other cases where I was working with a corporate structure, they would start with all the requirements, but it would take like a week or two before everything is finalized. And at the end of it, there was always this go, no go decision that was taking place. And there was almost a week during which a decision was being taken in terms of whatever had been discussed, is that the right thing? But prior to me documenting, a lot of those technical discussions used to take place. So my document was more or less final and there wasn't a lot of rework that was happening. And we would see a lot of rework after the tactical piece was implemented and testing was happening, and they would say something is wrong, let's revisit this. So every organization has their own set of rules and requirements. Of course, with Agile in place, it should be by the people, for the people as much as possible, but there might be a lot of processes that you will have to work around to make sure that the PRD is addressing what the team actually needs. At the end of the day, the document is essentially something that should have covered anything that your product touches or will touch your product. So make it your business to know. That's what I would say to a product manager, is like, you can't rely on this aspect of, oh, I was never told about this before. Make it your business to know. That's another personality difference that I've seen between being a BA and a product manager is BAs tend to get all the direction from someone who has worked on it. Maybe as you get into the consulting side, you become a bit more strategic in asking those questions to find out where the connection points are. But as a product manager, you always have to have this consulting mindset whereby you are uncovering things and you're trying to find all the different relationships. So I also like to use this analogy about treating it like a product diary, right? So anything that happened or anything that can happen, think about that, have like preemptive tools and techniques to uncover these things. Just doing a quick time check. I think we're good. In the next few slides, I want to share with you some tools and techniques that I have used in the past to understand how the PRD is supposed to be. So this is a slide that I put together with regards to design thinking. A few things that I think everyone has seen, the 5 different stages that are being presented at top. So we've got empathy, define, ideate, prototype, and test. And for each of these stages, what I would recommend is have 2 separate swim lanes, one that helps you think about the business context and the other one that helps you think about technology. And the third thing that I want to flag is that don't assume that this is just going to go in a linear fashion whereby you start with empathy and you kind of end at test, because there are going to be cyclical aspects or reiterative steps whereby you might prototype, but it might not really work. So you might have to go back to ideate. And then once you've gone into ideate, you realize that maybe none of the ideas that came up can really solve the problem. So now you want to go back and think about whether I want to redefine what I'm trying to assess here. Maybe the problem that I thought existed is not really a problem. But another major difference that I want to highlight is often traditionally in software development and often traditionally in BA space as well, we start off with the business case, which means that someone has already done the market research. Someone has already identified what needs to be done. They might have put some numbers associated with that. They might have put some ROI in there as well. And that sort of becomes your starting point as a business analyst to kind of go through the rest of the process. But you will notice that as a product manager, you are the person who's evangelizing what you're trying to solve. So thinking about it with the business hat, you know, what is the pain? Why is it painful? I think why is the biggest piece when it comes to product management, because that's really where your core of empathy kind of comes in. If you don't understand why you're doing it, you're not going to be able to work on your influential leadership. You're not going to be able to sell your product to someone else. You're not able to, you know, bring that essence of why you're trying to do something and why this is actually going to be an innovative change or it's going to be a revolution in the market. So it's very important for you to understand the why and how bad it is. That really helps you quantify. And these 2 things will form the key piece within your business case. which will then help you go through the rest of it. And of course, I've put in a lot of the traditional jargon that you would hear in both in the product management space and in the BA space. But these are, again, placeholders for you to identify, what is the scope of your product? What is the MVP? How are you going to be measuring your success? What are your OKRs? What are some of the use cases that you are trying to target? What are the requirements, the personas? What sort of market research are you going to use to support that? So this really gives you a good starting point. And again, depending on the stage of product development that you're in, this can be quite detailed or it can be very minimal because someone else has already done it and you are really going into the next stage, which could be ideate, prototype, or test. Often as BAs, I've also found that I was heavily involved in this prototyping stage and forward because it becomes a project and an initiative. But as a product manager, you really need to take a few steps back to figure out what's actually happened before we even arrive to this, right? So design thinking is one way of looking at this. Another tool that I want to share here today is the people, process, technology setup. If you have the product at the center, it's going to be interacting with all three components here. And I've just listed all the different variations that you can think of. When you think about people, you've got the buyers, sellers, users, you've got auditors. There could be cultural differences when it comes to, McDonald's has a different menu in Asia versus in North America versus in Africa versus Europe. So thinking about these aspects, there could be manufacturers. Some products could even be recycled. For example, when we're talking about branded products like, Porsche or Mercedes and things like that, those cars have a resale value even after their first owner. So how do you want that secondhand experience to be? Do you really want owners who are owning your product, a secondhand product, to have a similar experience? Do you want to cater to that market? All these are questions you need to think about. Secondhand users, complementer. So complementer, what I mean is that you have a specific product, but there's another company that has actually picked up on some kind of innovation which can be used along with your product. And therefore, if they're if your sales increases, their sales increases as well. So they almost become like an informal partner to your product. How do you want to work with them? In terms of process, you've got the whole A to B happening. If you think about the supply chain, where are you getting all your materials from, to where are you shipping it to? Who are the people who are providing services to your products? All these aspects come into the process side of things. And then technology, needless to speak, you need to, talk about this, but, the technology side of it, what's the solution? Who's actually building for it? Do you have talent for that, which kind of ties into the people aspect? How are you going to be monitoring on a day-to-day basis? How is the customer service going to be? So this is another tool that you can use to really map out your entire landscape. And I just did a quick example here of Airbnb to reiterate what I've just mentioned. But if you think about like Airbnb, you've got the vacationers, you've got the sellers who are the homeowners, and users in this case, they tend to be the same as your buyers because, people who want to stay in those places are the ones that you're targeting. Culturally, you want to think about, homes that allow drinking versus non-drinking. You've got certain fasting months that you need to be considerate of. You need to think about certain types of cultural aspects that people follow, even in terms of their food. You've got secondhand users, you've got complementers. There might be real estate agents who are actually selling certain properties to homeowners, saying that, hey, even if you're not living in this space, you can actually rent it out in Airbnb and you can make more money. So that's going to pay for your mortgage and things like that. So there are ways where people are leveraging this existing business to boost their own business as well. And I think the process side and the technology side, it's quite self-explanatory, but essentially looking at all the different aspects when you're thinking about the PRD. Other sources of information that I wanted to share, again, this gives you a bit of an MBA twist or a business administration twist to what you had been doing so far, but thinking about Porter's 5 forces, the PESTLE analysis, SWOT analysis, and even simply when you look at this bottom diagram here, this is really talking about how your company is structured. So just use your organizational structure in your company to figure out who your stakeholders are going to be and how are they going to be impacted. Why will they be impacted, and who are the people that they talk to that you need to think about? Who are the, the main customers? Who are the hidden customers? Who are the secondary customers? These are the different ways of approaching the PRD to make sure that it's as robust as possible for the goals that you're trying to achieve. And I think this is the last slide, but I wanted to give you some other techniques to kind of pick up on some of these concepts. One is really understanding how a business is run. I have a lot of coffee chats with people, and one of the key findings that I found when I spoke to product managers is that they have very entrepreneurial spirit in them, in the sense that they want to know what happens behind selling a product. What are the different aspects? They don't fear logistics. They don't fear the concept of facilitation. They don't fear investigating things. They don't fear taking a risk. And all of those things come from some of the entrepreneurial aspects that they're really interested in. So looking at a site like Quick MBA that gives you a quick snapshot of what are the different concepts that are covered in MBA doesn't mean that you have to fork out a big amount to learn the concepts, but you can expose yourself to them. This is a bit North American focused. There is an organization called Collab, which allows you to gain some hands-on product manager experience. However, I know that they're focused on North American market. I'm not sure if there's something similar in the South African market as well, but really what I was trying to achieve here is by telling you to go out and seek opportunities to experience as a product manager and therefore write a PRD. And there are some options here. Again, this was a bit North American focused, but I wanted to really give you an insight of what kind of keywords you can use to search. Even volunteering with an organization can help you build some of these skills. Tap into university professors. They tend to know a lot about the market, how things are going to change, how market will change. So they'll give you a lot of insight into how you can do research, which is a big plus point for product managers. Because if you're not able to research and find out if your product is doing well, you can't really tell the success aspect, and you've not really done your due diligence in that entrepreneurship type of environment. Attend a lot of conferences to find out what other people are sharing, listening to other speakers, trying to take some snippets of wisdom from each person is really the wise way of going forward, because you don't want to keep repeating the same mistake that someone already has, and you can learn from theirs. For some reason, I have reinstated university professors here as well, but really to reinstate that connection to education, it's really important. I know that's quite abundantly available in different parts of the world where people have achieved a level of confidence in their subject matter area and expertise, and really tap into them to find out what else you can find, investigate. The last thing is building your own product. And this I have found it to be one of the best ways of achieving something if all of the others don't work. So what do I mean by this? One is networking with like-minded people. So try to find out if they're all interested in building a product together with you. And if they are, start on a PRD. Writing out a document doesn't cost a thing. You don't have to invest in anything, but it really helps you, hone your skills in terms of the thinking process, in terms of assessing what are the different things you need to think about and why you would apply a specific tool or technique in one context, but not in another. So having a group of like-minded people will really help you build your, brain network to think in a certain way. Meet up with people. Sometimes meeting people outside of your context helps you think out of the box. For example, a lot of times I used to think about, the financial management side of things. And I used to think why people cannot manage their own finances. Banks keep giving you some new products, but you have to do your due diligence to go in and find what products are suitable for you. Instead, if we took something like, targeted marketing, whereby we know that these people own these products, of course, there are some data issues that we need to resolve, but it was really about the interest of trying to find out, if I know that this person has this credit history and I know that this product would be perfect for them, why can't an algorithm match the two and actually sign them up immediately as long as the customer is interested in having that product? So that is something that I thought about, and it was really coming out of the friends you may like on Facebook. If Facebook thinks that I would be good friends with this person based on my likes and dislikes, what really stops me from applying that same algorithm into financial aspects as well? The system will know my credit score. The system will know what kind of products I have today. And if the new products are offering me the exact same features with some added benefit, why not sign up to the new one without having to go through the hassle of filling out all the forms that I would have just filled out like 3 months or 6 months ago, right? So thinking about things out of the box really happens when you push yourself in terms of your boundaries. And last but not the least, sign up for companies you like to follow and learn more from them. I'm big on the consulting side of things because they always come with new ways, strategic ways of thinking about things. So I've signed up to a lot of newsletters from, McKinsey or Deloitte, and any of the other consulting companies that you're interested in, or any other product companies that you're really interested in. For example, Facebook or Microsoft or Amazon. If you're really interested in some of their thought processes, look out for free webinars with them and try to see what is their thought process and why do they work on certain things. When you read some of their news articles, they tend to give you a little bit of snippet into their history, why they thought this would be good, and try to expand that in your own words and in your own experience. What are some of your lived experiences that you can contribute to that situation and therefore make it better? So constantly, sharpening your skills by doing things on your own can really help you that way as well. I think that was the last slide. Yes, it is. Awesome. So thank you so much for hearing my experiences. And I think it's time for Q&A now.
Thank you so much, Banu, for the informative and excellent presentation. And thank you for sharing your personal experiences while being able to distinguish between business analysis and product management. From my side, I have about 4 questions, and I'll start with Deborah.
Okay.
Is there a body of knowledge available to project management practitioners?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question that I get on pretty much every presentation that I go to or every product meetup that I go to. But unfortunately, product management is not an area that has been documented in a good format, simply because of the variations and varieties that are out there. But what I would recommend is it's really about finding your calling. As I said, with product management, you have different streams that you can go into. You can go into technical, you can go into functional, you can go into strategic. And depending on what your area of interest is, you will have to somehow, gravitate towards something that you like. So when you talk to different people over these coffee chats and things like that, you will realize that you prefer doing product management in a certain way. And once you do, then you can start getting signed up for similar material, and therefore you can improve your knowledge. At the end of the day, the skill sets that you're looking for, I would say that in my career, I wasn't just a BA. I moved in a lot of different roles, and that was because I wanted to be a leader. Like, eventually that was my goal. And I felt that as a leader, I need to be empathetic towards all the people that will be working with me in my team. So I wanted to understand what it feels like to be a tester. What does it feel like to be a developer? What does it feel like to be a BA, a business owner, someone from architecture, someone from solutioning? And when I experienced all those different aspects, I realized that the way the market was moving, I didn't have to be a leader to implement all those different aspects. I automatically gravitated towards a product manager because I really enjoyed that multifaceted view. I enjoyed that aspect of, picking certain things from different roles. So it's really up to you to kind of design what kind of product manager you want. And then after that, you will know exactly what resources to kind of refer to. Because I know a lot of product managers like the technical side, so they tend to subscribe to a lot of information on the technology side. They take a lot of technical courses, whereas another set of product managers have always been focused on the strategy side of things, and they tend to gravitate towards that. So unfortunately, the short answer to your question is no, it does not exist. But that also means that you can shape the way that you want it to be, and then you can find a good match with a company that really matches with the skill sets that you have to offer.
Thank you for your answer, Banu. The second question from Upa. The onion diagram on the slide seems to equate product feature to a project. Is my understanding of this slide correct? If yes, then surely a BA can work on multiple product features simultaneously. So the question in essence is if a BA can work on multiple product features simultaneously.
Oh, yes, for sure. They can, as a BA, you can. Again, I want to make sure that I want to separate the differentiation. If you're still thinking about a BA type of role, I don't think that role has changed in any way in the new product space, apart from how the organization decides to separate your role. If the organization says no, as a BA, you can only work on one product, I think that is somewhat creating that scope for you. But as a BA, because you're only focusing specifically on requirements, you are able to work on multiple projects, just like we've always done. And as a BA, I've worked on anywhere close to like 6 different projects at the same time. And as long as I was able to handle the workload, my boss was okay with that. There was never a problem. But as a product manager, I would suggest you don't do that, because what that does is it takes away your attention from one aspect, unless the 2 products or the 3 products are so interrelated that you can take aspects from one and apply to another. But as a product manager, I'll generally caution against working on multiple products unless you know that the scope of your work is so small that you're able to manage all of them. That is the only key aspect. But I would really recommend having one product to focus on if you're a product manager and if you know that you're solely responsible for that product.
Thank you, Banu. Next question from Liz. If product owners can work on multiple projects with multiple teams, how do they manage to spend the appropriate amount of time with the project team? That's one. This is an issue is an issue in our organization. The POs cannot fulfill the roles described in Scrum Guide. So the question is, how do they manage to spend the appropriate amount of time with the project teams?
This really comes to a lot of the logistical aspects and also the maturity of the organization. To be honest, in the traditional agile format, I shouldn't use the word traditional and agile, it's almost like an oxymoron statement, but in the pure agile world, what people will caution against is having the same product owner for multiple teams. But I know that practically it has been done, and how they try to achieve that is if the product ownership is so streamlined and pure that they are able to handle multiple teams. Because at the end of the day, this is the situation that I'm trying to explain, is that the individual product teams that you have, i.e. the developers and the testers who are in that agile team, are your tactical team. Which means that they're basically the hands-on people on the project. The brains of that tactical team still resides with the product owner or the product manager that's involved. So technically speaking, if the product manager and the product owner have done their due diligence in saying this is the roadmap and these are the tickets that need to follow, they should be able to manage their own workload in terms of their own velocity, in terms of their availability, making sure that they're available for all the backlog grooming sessions, the PIR sessions, the daily stand-ups and things like that. If they are able to manage their time and also understand the priority, it might be that at the same time they're working with 3 different teams, but then 2 of them are not top priority for them and 1 of them is super high in priority. They might actually excuse themselves from the daily stand-ups, but that would mean that the tactical teams are left without any direction. So this really is going back on the logistical side of things, of whether the POs can acknowledge how much they are available. And I've seen that happen well when the product team also follows proper velocity techniques in saying that, you know, I only have 4 days that I'm available for this group and I'm available for 5 days for this group in this sprint. I'm going to be taking 1 day off, and that's my 10 business days within a 1 week sprint. So it does boil down to the PO being a lot more aware. It's a bit more hard to manage because I can see scenarios whereby you might be in charge of one feature, but to implement that feature, you might need to have 2 different teams working on it. So it has happened before. But it really is important to clear the sense of direction that the team is going, the roles and responsibilities and the scope and the boundary of what's being worked at. It needs a lot more communication and logistical coordination, I would say. But if you are finding a challenge in terms of time availability, I would definitely look at recommending maybe a pseudo product owner or like a junior product owner who can join the team and kind of be a spokesperson who's at least helping you with the liaison aspect, or even designating someone in your own team, the tactical team, to say that, hey, you are in charge of getting all the answers from the PO. Your Scrum Master should be able to help as well, because they should be the next person that you should be escalating to if your PO is not available.
Thank you, Banu. Another question from Nock. Where does a BA start to document the PRD for an enhancement of an existing product that doesn't have any document from its inception?
Oh boy, if I could save a penny for every time I was asked that question. It is true. I mean, most of the time when we join companies, not everything is documented. It might not be documented to the best of what we want. I'm a big document nerd, so I always find that whatever people have provided is not sufficient enough. And I'm like, why did you miss this detail? But the first thing that I would start off with is documenting or getting a historical context, like get your own individual walkthrough in terms of seeing how that specific feature is built. So you really want to focus on the, the goal that you're trying to achieve. So in this case, if you're enhancing just one part of it, try to treat that one feature or one function as your product and try to get a complete walkthrough of how it works. Talk to as many users as possible. Try to get your hands on audit logs. Try to get your hands on, a test environment for that one feature. Try to get a hold of like the clients or the customers who are using that feature today and how they are using it, and interviews. And all these things are possible if you even just dedicate one whole week to do a deep dive into all the features or all the aspects associated with that. And I would say create your own diary on the side. You don't need to put that entire detail into the PRD, but use that as your reference guide. You don't need to overwhelm all your users with that information, or even put it in the appendix saying that these are the things that I uncovered. And start off with what exactly your enhancement is. That's what I would recommend. And just go with, this is the focus of what we're trying to do. In fact, I'm actually doing some user interviews right now for an enhancement that I'm trying to put into one of the products. Basically, what I've done is I've scheduled 20-minute calls with 8 different teams that work on that specific piece. And I'm just talking to them with a checklist. I say, are there any recurring tasks that you send out for this? How many clients use this? How many times do you use it in a month? Just understanding the usage statistics and how they interact with it. So creating your user personas and user case scenarios for that itself is going to be contributing to a big chunk of what you want to document in your PRD. And once you know what the landscape looks like, you'll know exactly where to fit the puzzles to make it a good read.
Thank you, Banu. Sorry if I'm murdering people's name. My apologies. Another question from Leako. Is the product owner, that is Scrum, the same as product manager in terms of roles?
Yes, so the answer is no. They should be 2 different people. Product owner generally comes into play when things have become tactical. It means that you have done all the strategic thinking, you've done all the planning, you've identified your MVP, and then now you know what the solution is as well. You've talked to the technical architect and things like that. Once that's done, you will start planning for how do we actually implement this. And when you talk about implementation, that's when the product owner comes in. So usually the knowledge that a product owner has, they tend to be coming in with a more or less fulfilled understanding of what the product is trying to achieve or what it needs to do. A product manager tends to roll up. So there's a product manager and then you've got individual product owners. A product manager will also manage the entire product itself. So if you think about like, I'm taking a large scale example here, but if you were to think about like Facebook as a product, because of the size of the organization, you probably have a VP of product who heads that entire enterprise. Then you've got like group product heads who might be looking at, okay, these are the customer-centric, service-centric products, and these are the money-making products. For example, Facebook Marketplace ads might be a different one, like revenue generating versus non-revenue generating, which might just be us creating our Facebook profiles, managing the photographs and things like that. And then under the group heads, you might have like senior product managers who come in who are taking specific pieces of these functionalities. So someone might just be looking at how does a user profile look. So I'm a product manager for user profiles. I'm the product manager for how people store their albums. And then once that happens, you might have another layer of them with product ownership. And that's when, the customer profile product manager might have multiple product owners where one of them might be improving the way we can add filters on our profile photos. Another one might be adding how do we match interests for people to bring, friends you may like. So there's definitely a hierarchy. They are interchangeable. A lot of organizations do that depending on the maturity of the agile setup and the product setup in their company. But more often than not, a product manager is generally at a more, a higher level of view in terms of the products compared to the ownership. Product owners generally tend to work directly with the tactical teams. That's the developers and testers. But we can also have scenarios whereby product managers, if the product itself is still in its infancy, it's in a more startup type of environment, they could be both the product manager and the product owner.
Thank you, Banu. Another question from Richard. Would you agree that BA, PO, and product managers roles share many aspects that can be fulfilled by the same persons, depending on organizational culture or maturity? Is it important to define boundaries between the roles?
Great question. And the reason I have personal experience with this one is anyone who has gone through a career pivot will definitely do this investigation, because they really want to know how their previous skills can be ported over to the new role, and whether or not you're able to reuse the same set of skills that you've had. My answer, my personal experience is that yes, they can be fulfilled by the same person, but what you need to be mindful of is the workload that's involved. A BA tends to, the only reason I say that is because a BA tends to be much more tactical, while a product manager needs to be a lot more strategic as well, and business minded as well, in terms of how the economics would work, how you're going to be going to the market, and the number of conversations that you need to have, I would say, for a product manager is much more, because they might also be working with C-suite clients, they might be working with C-suite executives, and also maybe directly their clients as well. So the breadth with which a product manager works is very wide. And I also find that in certain companies, they don't define the product manager role very well. In the last few years, I am finding that business analysis has become better defined with the presence of IIBA, better understanding of the market in general, of what a BA does in the grand scheme of things. But a product manager is still evolving. It started off in Silicon Valley in the States with a lot of companies getting on that bandwagon, and they're trying to get more and more product managers hired in their company. But I don't think anyone truly understands the scope with which a product manager can handle things. So that's the first level of understanding. And the second level of understanding is how much scope and breadth does the person who's hired for that role has. We don't want to overwork. A product manager doesn't mean that they go in and fix every problem out there. It still has a defined scope, and I think it's very targeted on metrics and the success aspect of things, which a BA doesn't have to deal with. So on one hand, I want to say the skills are definitely transferable. I do not disagree with that. There is a lot of aspect that we can bring in from a BA space to the PM space. But what I would be very cautious about is how this person's performance is going to be measured. The way a BA's performance is measured is very different from how a PM's performance is measured. PM's performance is measured with a lot of visible metrics that is exposed across the entire company, but a BA might not be. BAs generally tend to be on the operational side of things. There have also been roles whereby PMs have been, having salaries with commission structure based on how successful their product has been. But a BA, I've rarely heard of it. I think one time I applied to a role which had a commission structure because it was in the sales team of the organization. But apart from that, I've never come across like a commission structure for a BA. But product manager, I've seen that happen because the success of their product denotes the success of them in their performance. So I will be very cautious to kind of have a product manager and a BA put together. A product owner and a BA, that's a bit more doable because the product ownership, again, is a more tactical role. BA is also a tactical role. So they will mesh well. And I myself have been in that role whereby I was a BA and a product owner. That works well. Product manager, I'll be a bit more cautious, but I do want to say that the skills are definitely transferable.
Thank you so much, Banu. I think the last question for you, a bit off topic, is lovely slide deck, Banu. What application did you use to prepare your slides?
I used Google Slides.
Okay, I think that's all the questions we have for today. I want to say a big thank you to our presenter, Banu. Thank you for your time, and thank you for joining us today. And I want to wish you all a lovely evening. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so much. It was great meeting you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, guys.